Solving the paradox. Panentheism revisited. Monism and dualism. Part 2. Resolving the issue regarding the conflict between homogeneity or geneity and diversity, or what you would say the one and the many, perhaps. Panentheism, a small seed planted in the social fabric of our species, an idea which only takes one Greek word to express. And of course, there are variations such as conjoined panentheism, symbiotic panentheism, eschatological panentheism, etc., process panentheism. And 3 English words to explain: pan, all, and in, and theos or theism, meaning God. The entirety of the phrase meaning all within God. And with that simple phrase, our species has the potential to change forever. A simple shift in consciousness, or a paradigm shift of sorts, into the panentheistic, open relational process metaphysic. Panentheism is the only understanding of reality rationally capable of resolving the debate regarding the validity of monism, which is often expressed in Eastern traditions, the existence of only physical existence, or dualism, the simultaneous existence of the physical aspect of the individual and the spiritual existence of the individual. The question dominating the debate regarding the validity of the either-or monism versus dualism, this has been, is awareness an innate characteristic of the physical, awareness being consciousness itself. The question, however, has become distorted over time, applying reductionism to the debate. And so we get anti-theistic conceptions such as atheism or agnosticism, etc. The actual question is the physical an innate characteristic of the abstract or spirit, or is the abstract or transcendent the innate characteristic of the physical? In essence, the question becomes, is the abstract in the physical, or is the physical in the abstract? Is matter in spirit and spirit within matter? Or are they, as many assume, completely separate substance? Is the abstract in the physical, or is the physical in the abstract? And if one or the other is the case, then why is it true? Modern day philosophers lean toward discussing the abstract or spirit, or what religions call God, in terms of the question, is the abstract an innate characteristic of the physical? Modern-day philosophers are in essence attempting to understand the relationship between the two, the physical and the abstract, or matter and spirit. Contemporary philosophers remain perplexed by Zeno and his identification of multiplicity and seamlessness. Philosophers, scientists, and theists do not understand how seamlessness can coexist with multiplicity, and as such are baffled by the concept regarding classification. It is the metaphysical system of Panentheism which provides philosophers with the means of resolving the ongoing debate, and thus allowing philosophers, and I might add, philosophical theologians, with the means of leaving the old debates behind and initiating new exciting dialogues to occupy the minds of humans. Resolving the issue regarding the conflict between homogeneity and diversity. Introduction. To understand the simplicity regarding the solution to the perceived complex paradox generated by the monist-dualist debate, one must model the third metaphysical system. Once having modeled the third metaphysical system, one must re-examine the issues surrounding contemporary philosophy, ontology, and cosmology in light of the new system. And of course, this would include theology and all of the other sciences as well. It is the issues which are important in such a re-examination of the monist-dualist controversy, not the philosophers, theists, and scientists themselves. We have spent ample time within the tractates 1 through 10 dealing with great thinkers in terms of contemporary thinkers, who is to say for certain which contemporary thinkers will be included as the great thinkers of the past. Each great thinker, regardless of subject orientation, has failed to advance the basic Aristotelian and Kant-Hegelian systems to a higher level of development. Therefore, rather than concentrate upon specific contemporary individuals, we will examine the concepts of contemporary monists and dualists. We will examine the shortcomings of contemporary thought, and we will examine how such shortcomings are resolvable through the application of the new metaphysical perception of the individual acting within God. And I would add here, whether that individual in their current awakening or non-awakened state are aware of their acting within God. Atheists, for example, refuse to become aware that they are acting within what religions call God, metaphysically speaking, and of course theologically as well. The dualist, on the other hand, perceives a distinct separation of physicalness, including all forms of innate characteristics. Physicalness generates from abstractual existence. It is the dualists who are ahead of their time, for as much as the dualist would like to think that they understand such a dualistic existence, no fundamental metaphysical system developed through 1995 explains such a concept. Does this work suggest the monists are obstructionists to the concept of understanding reality? Quite the contrary. This work suggests the physical exists independent of the abstract or spirit, yet dependent upon the abstract or transcendent or God, and in conjunction with the abstract. Does this work suggest the dualists are obstructionists to the concept of understanding reality? Again, quite the contrary. This work suggests the abstract exists independent of the physical, yet dependent upon the physical, a sort of interdependence between spirit and matter, and in conjunction with the abstract or transcendent pole of what religions call God. The physical or immanent pole, however, is limited by its universal fabric. In the case of our personal universe, the universal fabric is space and time. The universe, therefore, is limited by the very infiniteness of space and time. As such, time is limited by its very self. Our universe is thus limited by the endlessness of time itself, and may very well dissolve, as the Hindus believe. Perhaps a phrase that they use is the great dissolution. The physical itself may dissolve, only to be potentially repeated again by the physical. What then of the limits of the abstract? Is the abstract also limited by time and space? The abstract is not limited by time and space, for time and space are not external. Universal fabrics of abstractual purity, rather, time and space, are the universal fabrics of the physical, the material. So here we see the interdependence and interreactions between the spirit or spirit, physical, or matter, and the material. The abstract is, however, limited by its universal fabric. The universal fabric of the abstract, knowing, consciousness, mind. Within the new model of a third metaphysical system, duality becomes infinite in its multiplicity, yet the whole remains the whole, and as such, it is the whole which lends credence to the validity of the singularity of monism. As mentioned earlier and as expressed within the ancient Hindu system. And of course, I would think that various spiritual traditions express the monistic quality in different ways. The model implies a need for vast forms of diversity by the whole itself. Remember, you are a part or an aspect, or even at what you could call an emanation of the whole itself. Do not absolutize your particularism, because then you fall short of the bigger picture of the whole itself. Coming back home to the realm of our physical universe itself, and then returning to our home planet and our personal species, Homo sapiens, where does this model lead us in terms of our unique species and ourselves personally as unique forms of individuality found within our symbiotic panentheism? And now, working steadily through the paradox, we have the quagmire of diversity. Humanity has lost its way in the quagmire of diversity, quagmire of religious diversity. 1. Buddhism. 2. Islam. 3. Hinduism. 4. Judaism. 5. Zoroastrianism. 6. Christianity. And so on. The quagmire of cultural diversity. Asian Indian, American Indian, Incan, Eastern, Western, Lebanese, Greek, Italian, Hispanic, African, African American, Sudanese, Egyptian, and so on. The quagmire of biodiversity. Male, female, rainforest, desert, freshwater, saltwater, mountains, tundra, desert, etc. The quagmire of philosophical diversity. Reductive materialism, functionalism, eliminative materialism, sense data theory, positivism, neo-Kantianism. Phenomenology, analytical philosophy, logical positivism, logical empiricism, pragmatism, pauperism, transcendentalism, existentialism, hermeneutics, neo-Thomism, transcendental Thomism or Thomism, philosophy of ciphers, philosophy of transfiguration, of disproportion, of obedient potentiality, of courage to be, of religious acts, philosophy of science, philosophy of maturity, of the concrete, philosophy of interpretation, philosophy of infinity, neo-Marxism, humanistic neo-Marxism, early manifestations, the Frankfurt School of neo-Hegelian Marxism, existential and phenomenological Marxism, structuralist Marxism, French feminist philosophy, post-structuralism, and so on. The quagmire of ethical diversity, medical ethics, cultural, religious, political, bioethics, ecological ethics, moral, social, corporate, business, historical, pragmatic, Marxist, liberal, conservative, classical, contemporary, mainstream, bioeconoco-ethics, ethics of the radical right, of the radical left, of the living, ethics of the dying, and so on, ad infinitum. At first glance, it may appear diversity is a negative aspect of human perception, and unfortunately, many, with their one way, see it as such, which generates conflict from the close proximity acquired through the increase of our species population density. Such is not the case, however. Diversity, whether it be religious, cultural, genetic, geographical, perceptual, philosophical, or ethical, is what protects our species from the onslaughts of annihilation which homogeneity imposes upon any entity. In addition, diversity exists for a reason. Diversity exists as a process by which the very expansion of the whole becomes the whole from existing solely in a passive state of existence into the whole, existing in both the passive state and existing in the active state simultaneously. Humanity has found itself in a bitter and vicious conflict since humanity's history first begun. The conflict has been intense between those seeking to impose the conformity of homogeneity, such as the forced or willing conversions into one specific or particular religious or spiritual path, the imposition of conformity upon our species, and those attempting to impose diversity upon our species. The conflict is a war wherein the principles of homogeneity act as the foundation motivating those supporting racism, elitism, sexism, generationalism, culturalism, and the principles of diversity act as the foundation motivating those supporting civil rights, equal opportunity, equal justice for all. The desire to generate homogeneity was perhaps the greatest internal threat Nazism placed upon our species. Nazism attempted to establish conformity by force. The perfect race as the sole representative of the human race. If Nazism represented the zenith in humanity's monistic attempt to establish homogeneity as the characteristic of the human species, then doesn't a universal philosophy fall into the same classification as Nazism in terms of attempting to create a single form of metaphysical perception, homogeneity of perceptual understanding? The answer to this question is yes. A universal philosophy is a means of creating homogeneity of metaphysical perception if the metaphysical perception embraces only monism, or if the metaphysical perception embraces only dualism. But such is not the case. This is the very reason monism and dualism are at odds with each other. Monism refuses to give itself, allow itself to be eradicated for the good of dualism. Likewise, dualism refuses to give itself or allow itself to be eradicated for the good of monism. The result has been the long and traumatic conflict to determine who will win the battle for survival of the fittest. Monism or dualism, homogeneity or geneity or diversity. The battle between monism and dualism has been waging for over 2,500 years and continues today. The battle will not end if the battle solution remains an either-or scenario. And of course, this either or both and model can be applied to politics or any other sphere. A universal philosophy embracing either the physical as its foundation or the abstract or spirit as its foundation will find itself eternally at odds with its counterpart. Resolution of the conflict between monism and dualism thus appears to lie in the establishment of a universal philosophy which embraces both the monist and the dualist perception. And this is exactly what symbiotic panentheism proposes. But how can such a foundation exist? One cannot simply decide to embrace both monism and dualism simultaneously. A foundation is a foundation, and as such, must be defensible by all three means of developing perceptions: what we see, science, measurability; what we believe, religions, spiritual, and faith; and what we reason, philosophy, and rationality. The new metaphysical perception of the individual acting within God, whether they are aware of this or not, is beside the point. It is a metaphysical perception. Is immersed within the concepts of monism and dualism in the form of and rather than in the form of either or. The new metaphysical system of symbiotic panentheism, the individual acting within God, embraces diversity over homogeneity. The relative ugliness of monistic homogeneity does not give the edge to dualism. Dualism is as susceptible to perceived inhumane actions as monism. While a universal philosophy of monistic homogeneity may lead to actions epitomized by the Nazi master race and the Japanese Unit 731, a universal philosophy of dualistic homogeneity leads to actions epitomized by the Spanish Inquisition and genocide of the North and South American Native Indians. Dualism would seem to imply diversity, for dualism implies more than one. Dualism implies two or more, or diversification. Dualism, however, applies relativistic value to the parts, and as such, it is the apex of a value system wherein one level takes on a greater significance than the lower tiers. The result of such a ladder of value based upon relativism, is that the top of the tier becomes what it is the rest of the tiers strive to emulate. The result of such emulation is the same as that of the monistic homogeneity represented by a master race. A truly universal philosophy is not the attempt to create conformity through homogeneity and thus the elimination of its counterparts, but rather a universal philosophy is an attempt to preserve diversity, beginning with an understanding that the philosophical universality lies not in the choice, lies not in the either-or scenario, but rather a universal philosophy builds a rationality for diversity itself, and as such provides the rationale concerning the validity regarding the concept of equal application to all lies in the application of the term and rather than the term or. It is not X which exists as opposed to Y, but rather both exist. With the metaphysical model of the individual acting within God, one, a first truth does not exist, but rather three first truths exist simultaneously. I and you exist, the universe or universes exist, the whole singularity and individuality, multiplicity exists. Two, there is not either an outside to the universe or no outside to the universe, rather, both exist. Three, it is not morally wrong to kill or not morally wrong to kill, but both positions are correct. Four, it is not either the physical or the abstract, but both simultaneously. In other words, matter and spirit working symbiotically, hence the term symbiotic panentheism. It is not either a closed or an open system, but both simultaneously. It is not a case of centricism or non-centricism, but both. It is not a case of free will reigns or determinism reigns, but both. A term given is compatibilism. 8. It is not either monism or dualism, but both, simultaneously. The question then evolves from being which to becoming when and where. When does one become perceptually, morally, culturally, ethically, ontologically, medically, politically, metaphysically correct? And when does the other become correct? Actually, the process becomes a case of establishing a model with which rationally accounts for the significance of diversity and embraces diversity itself. Such a pluralistically system would appear to be nearly impossible to establish, for such a system would not only rationally embrace human diversity, but it must rationally, consistently, honestly embrace all diversity in a manner which reinforces said diversities. That's not, however, why such a model is called a universal philosophy. If the universal philosophy embraced human diversity alone, it would be labeled human philosophy. A universal philosophy is called universal because it applies equally throughout the entire universe or universes. Actually, the last statement is also incorrect. A universal philosophy is universal because it applies universally to all universes. A universal philosophy is a philosophical perception that develops intra and inter universal ties. To develop the inter and intra ties, the universal perceptions must reach through what lies between universes and thus must respect the very region it passes through as it leaves one universe and proceeds to enter another. In short, a universal philosophy must address the issues regarding the physical and the non-physical, or matter and spirit. either or. Black is black, white is white, and gray is gray. Becomes black or white is an either or scenario, and gray is an and scenario. How can two apparently opposite scenarios both be right? On a black and white printing scale, black is the absence of white, and white is the absence of black. Gray, on the other hand, is a blend of black dots and white dots. Gray is both. Gray is the and scenario. To clarify the issue, let's take an apparent black and white situation and examine how the gray emerges as the acceptance of both scenarios. An example, perhaps, could be the yin and yang symbol. Perhaps the starkest example we can use deals with the extermination of life, deals with life and death. Does society have the right, have the moral obligation to end a life if life is, metaphysically speaking, a piece of total experiencing, ontologically speaking, a piece of total omniscience, cosmologically speaking, a piece or a part of total consciousness? Within the metaphysical perception of the individual acting within God, which is Panentheism, the answer to the question is both yes and no. In Tractate 6, The Error of Kant, the first and second categorical imperatives emerged from the metaphysical model, the individual acting within God as, let us never forget, it is, probability speaking, inevitable that we shall someday be the weaker of the two. Therefore, it is inevitable that we would one day be the beneficiaries of having established just such an unselfish metaphysical system. We can now begin to understand why the two categorical imperatives are listed as they are. One, the first, responsibility to universally protect the right of virgin consciousness, one's self and others equally, to journey unimpeded. To the second, responsibility to journey unimpeded. As such, the moral obligation of society becomes, within certain scenarios, it is not only the right of society and the individual to kill, but it becomes the moral obligation of society and the individual to kill. And within certain scenarios, society and the individual have no right to kill. And in addition, society and the individual have no moral foundation to kill. Thou shalt not kill. How can both be the case? It would appear the and should be either or. Within the metaphysical model of the individual acting within God, however, it is not either or, it is and. If the individual is a piece or a part of omniscience, and it is, spirit within matter, for without spirit you would simply be dead matter. The individual is a part of omniscience, which is omniscient spirit, a piece of total consciousness, a part of total experiencing. The first categorical imperative would mandate the individual and society to do all they can to protect the journey of each unit or individual experiencing to experience in their own unique manner. The result, all journeys must be protected equally. And this is in many ways embodied within constitutions. The result, all journeys must be protected equally. Such protection may be the extreme action of termination if there is no other means of presenting or protecting said journey, rather than to terminate a singular journey, attempting to end the journey of others. And so we have capital punishment and the indication and notion that murder is indeed wrong. The desire for homogeneity. There is an endless array of seemingly righteous, reasonable, and observable reasons to impose one's own perception upon another. Whether religious, economic, cultural, ethical, or sexual reasons appear to dominate contemporary arguments to impose homogeneity upon others. But perhaps the most fundamental tool used to impose homogeneity upon others is fear and guilt. The role of guilt. I have money and I think you should also have money. Now I don't want to give you all my money, so we'll activate my guilt by giving you a little of my money. And to further alleviate my guilt, I will take some money from others and give you their money. The result is an attempt to establish a form of financial homogeneity. If I'm this way, I owe you being the same. It's my duty to make you as happy or unhappy as I am. Homogeneity. I am heterosexual, so you should also be heterosexual also. Homogeneity. I'm saved. I have the obligation to save you. Homogeneity. Within the metaphysical system of the individual acting within God, what is owed is equality of opportunity to reach all levels. All forms of diversity, whether it be sexual diversity or religious diversity. This does not imply discussions and debates should not take place between individuals and groups within society. Quite the contrary. Debate and discussion is a process of educating. Actions imposing the end result is, however, a violation of the first categorical imperative. The first categorical imperative is responsibility to universally protect the right of virgin consciousness, one's self, and others equally to journey unimpeded. A gift of reforming someone into being what they are is not a gift given to that individual, but rather making someone what they are not is a gift to yourself, given by yourself in the attempt to alleviate one's own guilt. Such action actually leads to the destruction of the very individuality of the recipient. Imposing your journey or beliefs upon the journey of another is the simple transposition of your journey upon the independent journey of another, and as such, imposing your journey upon the journey of another is nothing other than a form of abuse. You often hear, don't push your beliefs on me. Being right, which is right and which is wrong. Right and wrong are measured by infringement upon the three first truths: individuality, I and you exist; singularity, the whole of society, the whole of government, the whole of the nation, the whole of the whole exists; action, process, reality, the universe, the planet exists. But society is not an entity. Society is the summation of individual entity actions. The same applies for governments, cultures, and religions. So what is it that is termed a quagmire when we refer to the quagmire of diversity? Our present-day perception that diversity is a quagmire exists because we are bogged down in trying to resolve the differences when we should be attempting to respect the differences, since differences create the very advantages we profess to acknowledge. Diversity begets a greater degree of security regarding the preservation of our species, regarding the preservation of all species, be they terrestrial or extraterrestrial. Homogeneity. Understanding the dangers regarding homogeneity begins with the concept of the master race. The understanding regarding the significance of World War II cannot be reached without applying Husserl's reductionism to this traumatic event in human history, an event which led to the death of over 50 million individual humans. It led to the emotional scarring of countless more individual journeys. The metaphysical system supporting the concept of a perfect race leads to the natural outcrop of action facilitating the establishment of a race labeled the race, whose quote-unquote purity would most efficiently be protected from contamination through the elimination of potential sources of contamination and corruption. We all know what the Nazis thought of what was contaminating and corrupting their quote-unquote master race. Can anyone here say anti-Semitism? The process of eliminating the contamination and corruption begins at the far extreme and works towards the other extreme. The process begins with the elimination of perceived defective sources, be they mental, physical, or both. Man's inhumanity to man. The Nazi process began with the handicapped and the mentally retarded. Identification of said corruption and contamination must be defined in order to gain the confidence of the masses. Definition lulls the masses into believing they are not the targets, and more importantly, gaining the confidence of the masses requires convincing the masses they will never be the targets. The mental contamination barrier is thus logically established as all profoundly retarded. Anyone with IQs less than 20, in all cases of hydrocephalus, the goal is to eliminate the extreme fringe. Once accomplished, the next step is to move the bar of definition, for once the first objective is reached, no one is left beneath the bar. Thus, once all people with IQs less than 20 are eliminated, the extreme fringe becomes those with IQs less than 30, and those who may have some other extreme form of physical appearance, religious belief, and or cultural uniqueness. Eventually, the IQ bar is raised to the level of definition desired but capable of being manipulated by those in quote-unquote power. The man-made gods of perception. In the case of the Nazis, the ultimate goal was healthy, well-formed, uncircumcised bodies, sporting blue eyes and blonde hair, and the Japanese ultimate goal was geographical purity, racial purity. Was such a goal wrong, immoral, unethical? The Nazis had put into a place a metaphysical system which provided the foundation for such action. Metaphysical systems, by definition, do not deal with concepts of moral versus immoral, ethical versus unethical, good versus evil. Metaphysical systems simply model the whole of reality, and it is humankind which moves such a discussion into the realm of moral and immoral, ethical, unethical, good, or evil. As such, the metaphysical goal of the Nazis was not wrong, immoral, or unethical. It simply was. Metaphysical systems act as the foundation and the rationale for action. One cannot condemn the metaphysical system for the results of World War II. For just as the Nazis had the system they used to justify their acts, the rest of the world had its own metaphysical system, which is used as the rationale for countering the Nazi goals. Once reduced to its ultimate simplicity, the Axis metaphysical system reduces to the concept of homogeneity. The system based upon homogeneity was symbolically represented by the Axis two main armies, the Germans in the west and the Japanese in the east. Once reduced to its ultimate simplicity, the Allies' metaphysical system reduced to diversity. The system itself was symbolically represented by the vast diversity of races, cultures, and religions, etc., represented by the vast diversity observable within the single united army of the Allies. The Axis fought for the superiority of homogeneity. The Allies fought for superiority of diversity. But is the one right and the other wrong? Metaphysically, the answer is neither is right and neither is wrong. How then are we to decide which position to take, which action to initiate? Are we to initiate the action of preserving the quote-unquote superiority of individual diversity? Or are we to initiate the action of preserving the superiority of homogeneity. In essence, that is the very argument of the past 2,500 years found within the metaphysical debate begun by Zeno himself. Zeno elucidated the paradox regarding the physical and the abstract or the spiritual, and the debate exploded in an exponential manner from there. Today's debate regarding monism and dualism is no less than an extenuation of Zeno's paradox. Zeno suggests the existence of two forms of existence, the physical and the abstract. The monists suggest one existence. Physical existence, homogeneity exists. The dualists suggest two existences. The physical exists and the abstract exists. Diversity exists. This is not to say that all monists are Nazis, nor is it to say that all monists would take the same form of extreme action as did the Axis powers. Rather, what is being suggested is that the Nazis were in essence advocating the advantages of homogeneity and acting upon their beliefs, while the Allies were in essence advocating the advantage of diversity and acting upon their beliefs. But is biohomogeneity a positive for the human race? Examination of lower life forms suggests such is not the case. The book, The Coming Plague, gives an excellent overview of the world of the microorganism. The world of the microorganism is filled with diversity, and the organisms which find themselves mired in the purity of homogeneity find themselves unable to adapt to natural changes that occur within the world of nature, and thus find themselves eventually confronted with a change which leads to their annihilation as an organism, as a species. What does the examination of the world of microorganisms have to do with our species, Homo sapiens? There is only one form of species left upon this planet. That is the species Homo sapiens. If we insist upon reaching consensus, homogeneity, regarding all issues which presently provide us with a rainbow of biological, religious, and philosophical diversity, we will find ourselves in the inevitable position of all entities which cannot adapt to change. The result of immutable homogeneity is the same for all physical objects, be they a star, a mountain, or a biological species: eventual eradication. Again, the question surfaces: what of the development of a universal philosophy? Wouldn't the development of a universal philosophy simply be another form of homogeneity or conformity? This has been Panentheism Revisited, solving the paradox, the apparent paradox between monism and dualism within a process and or panentheistic metaphysical framework, and how the apparent paradox or conflicts can be resolved within that system by embracing an either, rather than an either or, embracing both monism and dualism within a panentheistic metaphysical perception. As with all knowledge, we may not be able to prove panentheism, and in this case, symbiotic panentheism, beyond all doubt, but with enough information, we can prove panentheism beyond all reasonable doubt. The preceding information was extracted from the larger body of work, which is within 3 volumes, entitled The War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception by Daniel J. Shepard. This particular lecture was extracted from Panentheism, Addressing Monism, Dualism, Volume 15 of the tractate. Thank you for listening. To be continued.